The clinking of crystal glasses echoed through the grand conservatory. I sat frozen at table 22, the overflow table hidden near the kitchen doors. Standing under a canopy of white orchids, my sister Chloe gripped the microphone. She had just introduced me to 200 elite guests as her mentally unstable, charity case stepsister. I looked at the head table. My stepmother chuckled. My own father actually smirked, swirling his expensive wine, completely amused by my public execution. I was supposed to shrink. He snatched the microphone from his new bride, turned his back to her, and stared dead straight at me. "You don't recognize her?" His voice boomed, freezing the entire room. "My name is Emma, and this is the story of how my sister's cruelest moment became her absolute downfall. Let's rewind to where this all started, to the exact moment the architecture of my life was permanently altered. Growing up in my father's house wasn't a normal childhood. It was a psychological performance, and I was never cast in a leading role. I was 8 years old when my biological father, David, married Susan. Susan came with a daughter, Chloe, who was exactly my age. From the very first week they moved in, the dynamic of our household shifted, and I was pushed into the dark. Chloe was immediately crowned the golden child. Her childhood bedroom was a custom-designed suite, while I was moved down the hall to a cramped guest room that always smelled faintly of mothballs. Chloe was enrolled in expensive pageants, bought designer clothes, and praised for simply breathing. I, on the other hand, learned early on that my survival meant staying entirely out of the way. There was no physical danger in our house, no locked doors or raised fists, but the emotional manipulation was a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was a silent, daily conditioning. If I got on a test, it was ignored because Chloe had successfully coordinated a new outfit. I was constantly told by my stepmother that I was too sensitive, too awkward, and not quite fitting the family brand. And my father? He let it happen. He chose the path of least resistance. He traded his role as my protector for the quiet comfort of keeping his new, demanding wife happy. While Chloe spent her teenage years obsessively curating her life for social media, accumulating followers and demanding expensive trips to maintain her influencer aesthetic, I buried myself in books. I wanted to understand fairness. I wanted to understand how to protect people who had no voice, probably because I had been stripped of my own. The breaking point, the moment I realized I truly had no one but myself, came the summer before college. I had spent years meticulously saving money from part-time jobs, combining it with a small college fund my late mother had started for me. One afternoon, I checked the balance. It was almost completely gone. When I confronted my father, he wouldn't even look me in the eye. He had drained my account to pay for Chloe's 6-week influencer tour across Europe. "Emma, be reasonable," he had sighed, adjusting his expensive watch. "Chloe needs this for her brand. You're smart. You can just take out student loans. It's an investment in the family's future." He didn't just empty a bank account. He emptied my future to fund her vanity. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I just walked out of his home office, packed my things, and went to work. I worked 3 exhausting jobs through college and law school. I waited tables, cleaned libraries, and tutored undergrads, running on 4 hours of sleep and pure, unadulterated willpower. Eventually, I passed the bar and became a legal aid attorney. I didn't go into corporate law to chase a 6-figure salary. I specialized in defending victims of false accusations and crushing financial fraud. I spent my days in the gritty trenches of the legal system, fighting tooth and nail for desperate people whose lives were on the brink of total ruin. To me, my career was my life's greatest pride. To my parents and Chloe, however, it was a humiliating joke. To them, if a job didn't come with a corner office, a $1 million bonus, or look good on an Instagram reel, it was pathetic. I was just the troubled charity worker who couldn't make it in the real world. That was the narrative they built. That was the lie they lived. And that was the exact lie Chloe decided to sell to the man she was about to marry. When Chloe got engaged to Liam, my father's house went into a state of absolute overdrive. Liam was a highly successful architect who had just launched his own firm, coming from a prominent old money family on the East Coast. To my stepmother and Chloe, Liam wasn't just a fiancé, he was the ultimate trophy. But there was a glaring problem in Chloe's perfect narrative, me. 3 months before the wedding, I received a text from Chloe demanding we meet at a high-end bistro downtown. When I arrived in my tailored but inexpensive work blazer, carrying a briefcase stuffed with case files, she was already there, sipping a sparkling water and checking her reflection in her phone screen. She didn't say hello. She just reached into her designer handbag and slid a heavy, cream-colored envelope across the marble table. It was letterpress, stamped in gold foil. I looked at the front. It didn't have my name on it. It just read, "Guest of the bride's family." "Listen, Emma," Chloe said, stirring her drink without bothering to make eye contact. "Liam's family is very high society. They value pedigree. They value success. I've had to tell them a few white lies to keep things simple for everyone." My chest tightened. I knew that tone. It was the same tone she used when she broke my things as a child and blamed the dog. "What kind of lies, Chloe?" She sighed heavily, as if my mere existence was a massive inconvenience to her day. "I told them you've been struggling for years, that you have some deep-rooted emotional issues, and you bounce from one low-paying charity gig to another because you just can't handle real, adult corporate pressure." I sat perfectly still. The ambient noise of the bistro seemed to drop away. "You told your future husband and his entire family that I am mentally unstable?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "I just framed it so they wouldn't ask questions. It perfectly explains why you aren't one of my bridesmaids, why you're single, and why you don't fit in with our crowd. It makes me look supportive for even inviting you." She leaned forward, her voice dropping into a harsh, commanding whisper. "Just show up. Sit in the back. Don't talk to anyone about your depressing, low-income legal cases. Do not embarrass me. Let me have my perfect day." I wanted to prove to myself that I was unshakable. So, I slid the envelope into my briefcase. "I'll be there," I said evenly. I thought I was walking into a miserable, quiet evening in the shadows. I had absolutely no idea that Chloe had just handed me a front-row ticket to her own spectacular destruction. Here is part 4, focusing on the ultimate emotional betrayal by her father and the final snapping of her familial ties. Part 4, the rehearsal and the warning. The rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding was a masterclass in systematic exclusion, hosted at the Oak Ridge Country Club. The room was a sea of bespoke suits, diamond tennis bracelets, and the quiet, confident hum of old money. Liam's family mingled effortlessly with Chloe's heavily curated list of photogenic friends. I arrived in a simple, off-the-rack navy dress, immediately feeling like a trespasser in my own family's event. When I checked the gold-frame seating chart, I wasn't seated with my parents. I wasn't even seated with the extended family. I was placed at table 14, the overflow table, tucked neatly behind a massive floral arrangement, practically touching the swinging doors of the catering kitchen. I was seated with the wedding planner's assistant and 3 empty chairs. As the dinner wound down and guests moved to the patio for cigars and cocktails, I saw my father standing alone near the valet stand. He was adjusting the cuffs of a tuxedo that I knew my stepmother had insisted he buy to keep up appearances. This was my moment. The last desperate attempt of a daughter wanting her father to step up. I walked over, the cool night air hitting my face. "Dad," I said softly. He jumped slightly, turning around. A flash of annoyance crossed his face before settling into his practiced, neutral mask. "Do you know what Chloe told Liam's family about me? Do you know she told them I have deep emotional issues? That I'm some sort of unstable charity case to explain why she's hiding me away." My father wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked out at the rows of luxury cars parked in the circular drive. He sighed, that specific, heavy sigh he always used when I was being an inconvenience. "Emma, please," he muttered, aggressively adjusting his silk tie. "Is it really that difficult to just swallow your pride and let your sister shine for once? Not everything is about you and your crusade for justice." He didn't just know. He approved. That was the exact moment my heart finally, quietly, and permanently detached from the man who helped bring me into the world. He wasn't a passive bystander. He was an active accomplice in my erasure. I would witness her fake triumph, and then I would walk out of their lives forever, without looking back. I had no idea the universe had a completely different verdict in mind. The wedding day was an extravagant $100,000 spectacle designed to secure Chloe's place in high society. Held in a breathtaking glass conservatory that overlooked a private lake, the venue was dripping in thousands of white orchids and illuminated by massive crystal chandeliers. 200 of the city's most elite and wealthy residents filed into the room, a sea of designer gowns and custom tuxedos. I was placed at table 22, the absolute furthest corner of the room, wedged between a structural pillar, a grumpy distant uncle who complained about the draft, and a vacant chair. The centerpiece on my table was noticeably smaller than the others. I was geographically as close to invisible as the room's architecture would allow. For the first 2 hours, the plan worked perfectly. She held a crystal-encrusted microphone, looking every inch the triumphant, flawless bride she had spent her entire life pretending to be. She started with Liam's parents, thanking them for welcoming her into their incredible legacy. She thanked her bridesmaids. Then she turned to my father. To my dad, Chloe cooed, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. The man who showed me what a real protector looks like. My rock. The man who gave me everything. My father's eyes went glassy. He raised his wine glass to her, soaking in the applause from the 200 guests. Chloe let the applause die down. She paced slowly across the dance floor. And then her eyes bypassed the VIP tables, bypassed the center of the room, and locked directly onto me, hiding in the shadows of table 22. A slow, calculated, utterly venomous smile crept onto her face. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge my stepsister Emma, Chloe said into the microphone. The spotlight operator, following her gaze, abruptly swung the blinding beam of light across the room, pinning me to my chair. 200 pairs of eyes shifted to the back corner. The room went dead silent. Emma has always walked a different path than the rest of us, Chloe continued, her voice dripping with manufactured, patronizing sympathy. A ripple of uncomfortable, awkward laughter echoed through the massive conservatory. I looked at the head table. I looked at the people who were supposed to be my family. My stepmother was chuckling, covering her mouth delicately as if Chloe had just delivered a brilliant punchline. And my father? He didn't look away this time. He looked right at me, swirled his expensive red wine, and smirked. He was actually amused by my public degradation. Chloe wasn't finished. She turned back to her new husband, who was seated at the head table. She wasn't just hiding me anymore. She was using me as a human sacrifice to elevate her own savior complex in front of her wealthy new in-laws. I was supposed to shrink. I was supposed to burst into tears, push back my chair, and run out the swinging kitchen doors, proving to every single person in that room that I was exactly the weak, unstable mess she claimed I was. But I didn't look down. I forced my hands to uncurl. He leaned forward abruptly, his elbow catching the edge of his crystal champagne flute. It toppled over, plummeting off the edge of the head table and shattering against the marble floor. The sharp, violent crack of breaking glass sliced through the room's polite, uncomfortable laughter. But Liam didn't even flinch. He didn't look down at the mess. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The entire room went dead silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the air conditioning humming in the vents. Chloe turned to him, her perfect smile faltering into a mask of genuine confusion. "Babe? What's wrong? Did you cut yourself?" Liam didn't answer her. He walked rigidly away from the head table, stepped onto the pristine white dance floor, and snatched the crystal-encrusted microphone right out of Chloe's hand. He didn't look at his new bride. He kept his eyes locked on me across the sea of tables. "What did you say her name was?" Liam asked. His voice didn't carry the warmth of a groom giving a toast. It was the cold, terrifyingly calm tone of a man demanding the absolute truth on a witness stand. Chloe blinked, looking around at the sea of confused guests. Emma, she stammered, her voice suddenly small. "Emma Hayes." "Why?" Liam turned slowly to face her. "You don't recognize her?" Chloe let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh, her eyes darting toward my father for support. "Recognize her?" "Liam, what are you talking about?" "She's just my messed-up sister. I told you, she works at some depressing charity clinic." Froze is the only word to describe what happened to the room next. Liam's response shattered the air like a thunderclap. 5 years ago, Liam's voice boomed through the massive speakers, rigid with absolute, unyielding authority. He turned away from Chloe and addressed the 200 elite guests. Before I built my architectural firm, before the money, before the success you are all celebrating tonight, I was a desperate 24-year-old facing 20 years in a federal penitentiary. A collective gasp swept through the conservatory. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Liam's own parents looked down at their plates, tears welling in their eyes at the sudden, raw memory of their family's darkest hour. My former business partner had framed me for massive corporate fraud, Liam continued, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Our family's accounts were frozen by the government. We had absolutely nothing. Every high-priced, elite lawyer in this city laughed in my face when we couldn't pay their retainers. I was publicly ruined. I was suicidal. I was completely, utterly destroyed. Chloe stood frozen on the stage, the color draining from her face as she realized she had completely lost control of the narrative. My father lowered his wine glass, his smirk vanishing into thin air. The court assigned me a public defender, Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. A young, severely overworked legal aid attorney who didn't care about money and didn't care about social status. She worked 80-hour weeks on a salary that barely covered her rent. When everyone else told me to take a plea deal and go to prison for a crime I didn't commit, she refused. Liam took a step closer to the edge of the dance floor. The spotlight operator, sensing the gravity of the moment, widened the beam to catch him. She dug through thousands of encrypted financial files on her own time. She found the digital footprint that proved my innocence. She didn't just win my case. She gave me my life back. She saved my family's entire legacy. Liam stepped down from the elevated stage. The microphone still in his hand, he began walking down the long center aisle, right past the VIP tables, right past my glaring stepmother, heading straight toward the back corner of the room. We only ever met in cramped, fluorescent-lit interrogation rooms, Liam said, his voice dropping to a softer, more intimate volume as he walked. She always wore thick glasses. Her hair was always tied up in a messy bun, and she was always buried behind a mountain of legal paperwork. I only ever knew her as Attorney Hayes. After the trial, after I was fully exonerated. He stopped. Right in front of table 22. Right in front of my tiny wilting floral centerpiece and my empty chairs. He looked down at me, the tough, successful architect now fighting back tears in front of 200 people. You, Liam whispered into the microphone, his voice breaking. It's you. I stood up slowly. The cheap dark blue dress I had bought on clearance suddenly felt like absolute armor. The years of being hidden, the years of being mocked by my family, all of it evaporated in the span of 10 seconds. I looked at the man whose life I had fought so desperately to save 5 years ago. I offered him a small, dignified smile. Hello, Liam, I said quietly, my voice steady and clear without needing a microphone. I'm very glad to see you're doing so well. Total chaos erupted. The polite, carefully curated veneer of the Oak Ridge Country Club shattered in an instant. The only manipulator in this room is you, Chloe, Liam said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register that carried through the dead-silent room. You looked me in the eye for 6 months and told me your sister was a deeply troubled addict. You told me she was unemployed, emotionally unstable, and leeching off your parents. I was just protecting our image. Emotions are running high. This is just a massive misunderstanding. Let's take this to the back room and... Do not call me son, Liam snapped. His voice cracked like a judge's gavel, echoing off the glass walls. There is no misunderstanding here. You sat at that table, drinking my family's champagne, and you smirked while your daughter publicly humiliated the woman who is the sole reason I am standing here today as a free man. My father physically recoiled, his jaw dropping open. Liam then turned his back on my father and faced the crowd of 200 people. He raised the microphone one last time. My family prides itself on honesty, loyalty, and integrity, Liam announced, his voice steady and resolute. I cannot and will not legally or morally bind my life, or my family's legacy and assets, to someone capable of such profound, calculated deceit. He turned to look at Chloe. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt suffocating. Chloe let out a gut-wrenching shriek, collapsing into a nearby chair, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. My stepmother rushed to console her, her face burning with the ultimate humiliation. My father stood completely frozen, staring at the floor. The extravagant $100,000 wedding had legally and publicly collapsed into a crime scene of Chloe's own making. Liam handed the microphone to a stunned waiter. He turned back to me, his expression softening instantly into one of deep respect. I walked down the long center aisle, my head held incredibly high, flanked by the very high society family Chloe had just destroyed her life trying to impress. The aftermath of that night was as swift as it was absolute. By Monday morning, Liam's elite legal team had officially severed all pending financial and business ties his firm had initiated with my father's company. The massive development contracts my father had been bragging about for months evaporated overnight. She was left trying to explain to her thousands of followers why her billionaire groom had publicly walked out on her in the middle of their reception. Unsurprisingly, the friends who had attended the wedding for the free champagne and photo ops stopped returning her calls. My father tried to contact me dozens of times over the next few weeks. He left long, rambling voicemails begging for forgiveness, claiming he didn't realize how bad things were and that he wanted to fix our family. I didn't answer. I didn't delete the voicemails either. I simply handed them over to a colleague and filed a formal, legal cease and desist order to ensure my father and stepmother could no longer harass me. I didn't do it out of anger or revenge. I did it because, as a lawyer, I knew exactly how to protect my peace. We are fully staffed and entirely dedicated to protecting victims of emotional, financial, and legal abuse who cannot afford high-end representation. Liam and I have become close friends, bonded by a shared, unspoken understanding of what it means to survive the darkest parts of human nature and come out the other side intact. Because eventually, the truth always steps into the light, and when it does, it changes absolutely everything.